It's time for This Week in WordPress, episode number 164, recorded on Monday the 24th of May 2021. It's entitled, A Lively Debate. I'm not joined this week by Paul Lacey, he's got some other things to do, so we've just got two guests on the show this week. We've got Birgit, Pauli-Haack and Spencer Forman, and we do have a lively debate. We start off talking about the Social Image Generator plugin, then we move on to Stellar WP, which is a new amalgamation of brands under liquidweb. We then talk about Profile Press and how the plugin this week updated and went from being a simple avatar plugin to being a whole membership suite, and how the community have reacted with their 1-star voting. We then get on to the fact that I did a podcast this week with Benjamin Intal over on the WP Tavern side of things, and then the magic starts to happen. We talk about Gutenberg and Gutenberg times and how there's a ton of jobs over at Automattic. We finish talking about WordSesh and the WP Engine Summit, but it's a lively debate centering around Gutenberg, whether it's fit for purpose or not. Well, I hope that you enjoy it. This Week in WordPress was brought to you by Termageddon. When you build contact forms for client websites, you may be forcing that client to comply with multiple privacy laws. Rather than avoiding discussing the importance of privacy policies with your clients, try out Termageddon, the auto-updating privacy policy generator. The best part is that Termageddon gives web agencies a free set of their policies forever, in the hope that you like their product and use their reseller or referral programs to help your clients get protected too. Your client gets protected, you make more recurring revenue. Go to termageddon.com and click the Agency Partners page to receive your free license today. And by A/B Split Test. Do you want to set up your A/B split tests in record time? The new A/B Split Test plugin for WordPress will have you up and running in a couple of minutes. Use your existing pages and test anything against anything else. Buttons, images, headers, rows, anything. And the best part is that it works with Elementor, Beaver Builder and the WordPress block editor. Go check it out and get a free demo at absplittest.com. I've got very little to say about Spencer because I didn't get a lot in the, I didn't get a lot written, so I'm just going to hand it over to him when it's time. But for Birgit, I have something. So over there is Birgit Pauli-Haack, and it says over here she is the publisher of the Gutenberg Times, a site with news around the WordPress block editor and beyond. Birgit hosts regular Gutenberg live Q&A on YouTube and co-hosts the podcast Gutenberg Changelog with Gregor Ziaskowski. I am so sorry that I've butchered that person's name.
Well, he goes by Craig because he gets this a lot. It's Gregor Ziaskowski, yeah.
Oh,
I had to practice that as well. So
okay. I'm sorry. Yeah. I should have spotted that beforehand. And anyway, thank you. I really appreciate joining us once more.
Well, thanks for having me.
And obviously we have we're just there is Spencer Forman, and all I've got here is that Spencer Forman is from wplaunchify.com, but maybe you want to tell us a bit more than
Sure. Yes, WP Launchify is my primary property, and I'm also over at launchflows.com, and they're both somewhat related. I've been around WordPress literally since the beginning, but what I like to say I'm responsible for is helping people understand WordPress as a platform. Specifically, I work with the authors of all of the major plugins and other components, as well as the end users, to help them understand how, if you really came into it from a different angle, WordPress is better than almost every other SaaS platform. We just help you to understand which plugins to use and how to put them together into a system. And so WP Launchify is a free service that leads to consultancy. Launchflows is just another plugin that turns WooCommerce into the sales funnel powerhouse that it can be. And I really enjoyed the fact you had me on your show recently. Yeah. And we talked about that a little bit.
Yeah, we were just on the screen by pure coincidence. Look at that. Episode 229. If you want to go and check it out, just go to wpbuilds.com and look for episode 229. And
it's an excellent service, actually, because it's a really hard time for someone who hasn't been online as a business owner to get this funnel part really right, and that they actually have to produce some ideas about, okay, in which situation is your visitor and what can you offer them in that stage. Yeah? So I'm really happy that this is around. So thank you.
Yeah, we're pleased as well. And it's, by the way, not to talk too long on that, but we service both the professionals in the space, the WordPress implementers, as well as the end users, because many of the professionals are forced to wade through a lot of legacy stuff. And if you have maybe 1 or 2 services or plugins that are out of date, you can end up trying to recommend or do something that can take you 10 times longer and get you 1/10 the results. So that's where it works on both ends.
Yeah.
Well,
Awesome.
thank you. Thank you for that. But,
Thank you, Birgit.
229.
You're welcome.
I'll mention that again in a second. But quick message from this. I will always talk about comments at the beginning. But Cameron Jones in Australia saying, I guess Paul Lacey has been fired. Those of you who aren't watching but are just listening may have noticed that Paul hasn't said a word yet. Sadly, Paul is unable to join us today. He'll be back, I'm hoping, next week. He's got other things which he needs to tend to, shall we say. But if he's listening in, which he may be, then hello, Paul. I hope to see you in a few days' time. The normal stuff which I've got to get on with is if you've got any questions, drop them into the comments while you're watching this, and hopefully there'll be a bit of time as we go. And also just to say that if you are watching over at wpbuilds.com/live, you can just use Google. You can be logged into Google because it's YouTube. But if you're in the Facebook group, then you need to click on the link in the description, which is streamyard.com/Facebook. And then we can see who you are. And it doesn't just say anonymous Facebook user, which is very helpful. Okay, what are we doing here this week? As always, we are here to talk about the WordPress news. WP Builds is where we dump all of our stuff each and every week, podcast episodes, things like this. So you can go and check that out at your leisure. If you fancy clicking the subscribe button up there, then you'll be taken to a page where you can be notified when we produce stuff each and every week. But rather than droning on about that, let's get stuck into the actual content for this week. And we've got maybe 8 or 9 different items, depending on how the pace of the session goes. But the first one that I wanted to mention was this one. Now, I think typically something like this wouldn't make it onto the show, not because it's not interesting. I don't know. It just wouldn't. But something about this caught my attention this week. I just really like it. This is the idea that you can, I should probably just put the URL up as well. It's socialimagegenerator.com. And as you can see on the actual page itself, it says Social Image Generator is a WordPress plugin that automatically creates social share images for your content. Sadly, if you're listening to this on audio, you won't get an impression of how good this is. But basically, it just automatically creates those social images that you want to put out there with all of the bits and pieces aligned and created perfectly. I do this manually each and every time that we produce a piece of content. I go into a little online something like Canva or something like that, and I basically just rewrite what I did before. But I just love the fact that this can now be done in a plugin without you having to think too hard. You just kind of pick a template that you want for this particular one, and you're off. That's it. And I just thought that was a really nice one to start with. So if you guys want to comment on that, I'm just giving the developer a shout out. Well done. I think this is a great idea. But if Birgit or Spencer want to talk about it, go for it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Do you want to go, Spencer?
Go ahead, Birgit. Sorry.
Well, I wish that was around when I had my social media agency about a few years back, where we really did a lot of hand building of those social images. It's really nice. And I found, I tested it a bit and I looked at the video, and it's quite comprehensive what you really want to do as a social media marketer. So, and you get all the things from your website, and that's always a win when you don't have to change tools and all that with the switching costs. So I really like it. I'm glad you pointed it out.
Spencer.
I mean, I can see the value of this for sure, because I was just addressing this. I had originally used Canva when it first came out and thought it was a neat tool. But, there were other tools at the time that were, the standby stuff that we had all used. And then I recently went back and visited Canva again, primarily this being one of the reasons, because I realized that the time involved, the cost of my own time of going and fixing every post for this was time consuming beyond its worth. So Canva has some tools in it, but as a comparative, This actually, I think, would in many ways improve upon that, because Canva, you still have to make the images in advance. And even though you can do a pretty good job of it without much time, this does it on the fly. It's shocking to me, but then again, as a developer, I sometimes see this, how many big pain points there still remain in the core process of WordPress posting. And I would say this is one of them. So kudos to the developer. Price seems reasonable, $39 a year. I mean, you would definitely save that kind of time.
Yeah,
I reckon
absolutely.
you only need to produce 2 images and you've saved that amount of time, right?
Yeah.
So the options are pretty straightforward. You basically imagine you're in a post. You kind of have some options to pick a template, change some colors, type some text over the image. And so if it's a long post, you might want to go for a particular template where the text is over the left and the image is on the right. So simple options, but just gets the job done in a completely satisfactory way. Right. I don't know if either of you two have come across an online tool called Stencil. It's a little bit like Canva, but with less bells and whistles. They've got a really nice implementation in WordPress in that you can marry it to the media library. And you can kind of interact. You have to have the SaaS account, so it's not just WordPress.org. You have to have a SaaS account, but then you can interact and do all the complicated things that Stencil does. And then you just click save, and it just dumps it straight into the media library. So that's kind of like a halfway house. But this is all just so much more straightforward. So kudos to Daniel, and forgive me, Daniel, I haven't caught sight of your surname, but thank you very much.
I would add one thing here too, and I think this is a pretty good example of it. One of the things I was referring to earlier with WP Launchify is that people don't realize the origin story of WordPress being that anybody could make anything for any purpose. It was a big potluck dinner. But what we're finding today is that the developers who make products that are singularly focused, priced correctly, and fill in a space, most like a Lego block inside of an existing stack of Legos, are the plugins that really serve the best purpose and are the best for their intended, why do I need this kind of moment? And that is the kind of stuff that this really seems to do. I like that better than the ones that we're going to talk about it, maybe another story, that try to jam everything under the sun into their plugin. Because then what happens is you have to spend a lot of time and a lot of energy turning off or deciding whether to use something. Whereas with this, you can understand it very quickly, and it's going to do what it's supposed to do, and it solves a pain point. And that would be a perfect way to describe how all plugins should work in WordPress in today's climate.
Yeah, nice thoughts.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, there are 2 or 3 little plugins that I like very much, and they do one thing only, and that do it well. One of them is the public post preview.
Oh, I use that. That's fabulous.
That's really great, and it has a Gutenberg. It can handle Gutenberg, and then the other one is switch post type, which is when you start out as a page and said, maybe that's another start of a new series of blog posts, then you can switch them over to just a post and don't have to copy paste it over or something like that. Yeah.
The preview public post one is absolutely fabulous. If you just want somebody who's not on your team to just take a quick look over something, it appends a 8-digit code at the end of the URL, and anybody with that 8-digit code appended to the end of the URL can actually view the post in draft without being logged into WordPress. It's sublimely cool, and I don't know how many thousands of times I've used that. So yeah, good mention. So this one is, if you want it for 1 site, it's $39. 5 sites is $99 by the looks of it, and 25 sites is $199. Anyway, go check it out. It was socialimagegenerator.com. Right. Okay. Let's move on. This is honestly, I didn't know about this until Paul Lacey put this my way. This is stellarwp.com, and the tagline over here is "We eat, sleep, and breathe WordPress." This is the coagulation of some mighty players. I kind of feel like, how did I not know this was going to happen? Stellar WP is liquidweb's home for the most trusted e-commerce and non-profit plugins on WordPress. And here's the laundry list. So now we have the joining. We probably knew on some level that this was happening, but it wasn't branded under this Stellar WP brand, of iThemes, the events calendar, Restrict Content Pro, Cadence WP, and Give WP. And it really wasn't that long ago that Give WP, it was like a couple of weeks ago, announced that they'd been bought. Little prior to that, maybe a month or so ago, Cadence, and maybe like 18 months ago or something, iThemes and the events calendar and so on. I don't really know what the play is here, other than that I'm guessing that maybe you'll get this stuff for free if you're on their hosting.
No. This is the, if you go to the very bottom, I had a good talk with Chris Lemma this week. The very bottom left, you'll see LiquidWeb, and then they have two other child companies, Stella, and that was for old fans of.
Is that an American joke? Because I don't get that.
I don't get it either.
That was Streetcar Named Desire. That was Stanley, the main character.
Okay.
Anyway, and then Nexus. Okay, so Stellar and Nexus are basically the hosting, the cloud hosting part, and then the companies they're buying, which I don't think I'm saying anything that's not public, are LiquidWeb's investment in where WordPress is going. It's a holding company for those companies. They're going to let them run themselves. They bought them. They're going to run themselves. So all this is, and that's why you never saw it, and neither did I, because when I talked to Chris, I said, I don't see any reference to GiveWP or iThemes or anything else over on the LiquidWeb website. Where are these going to show up? Are they going to show up in a product and so forth? Yeah, they may show up in products that people buy, like a hosting package. But the way they've divided it out is LiquidWeb is a family of brands, and now there's two baby brands, Stellar and Nexus. And this is a recent, well, Nexus has been around a little longer, but the Stellar is a recent incarnation. So when they're buying these companies, the ones you see there, they all end up under this baby brand, and they're being operated with an incentive for the previous owners to continue to participate in the success of the companies. I think that's a good way to say it. So rather than buy it, get rid of all the owners and kill it, they're trying to do it a different way.
Because my recollection is that obviously iThemes was bought by LiquidWeb, but in turn was iThemes that bought Cadence. So
right. Yeah, because they incorporated it into the product a little bit.
Okay,
but you got to also understand that it's an interesting thing. Like Corey, who was one of the the lead face on iThemes, was not actually the owner entirely by himself, is the best way to say it. And so there was a lot of team acquisition that went on. And Corey now, I think, went on this week. They announced that he's taken over Brian Krogsgaard's share of that operation. Right. And so, everybody has their thing they want to do. And I was asking him specifically about GiveWP because I had some contact with the owners in various places, including at WP Fusion. And I was curious about the buyout because that's a very large company, 23 people in that company. And for WordPress, that's a pretty large size company. So this is where I found all this info. And I admit I was in the same position as you of it really wasn't obvious how this is all structured. But I think it makes a little more sense now when you think of it in those terms. LiquidWeb has a legacy of being a hosting company, but with a variety of different hosting options. And now they're breaking it out into the various things they do. Here's our software stuff. Here's our hosting stuff. Here's our who knows what they're going to do next stuff.
I've got to say, I really like the idea of the whole let's just let it all carry on as it was thing. Obviously, if it was kind of root and branch, the company was falling to pieces and you bought it up because it was failing, then okay, that's fine. Let's alter things. But from the outside, it didn't feel like anything but, in fact, that Cadence in particular and Give and all of these other ones that we could see on the screen, none of them felt like they were in that position. And
it's like the Rolling Stones in the 60s moving to exile in France to get away from the British taxation system. If you're a company here based in America, there's probably, I'm guessing here, but there's an infinite number of reasons to structure these things in a certain way, not just for marketing, but for taxes and so forth, because there's a lot of money that's available to invest in various things today. And I think they're probably smart by dividing it up into segments and so forth. At least that's my personal guess as to what's going on here.
Yeah, I think it's also a branding issue. Yeah, GiveWP has 100,000 installations, and people know about GiveWP and that's donation part. If it's all of a sudden an iTheme add-on or something like that, I think that would be really hard for people to continue having the trust in the brand that they came to trust the last 5 years or 6 years.
And Chris said that. I mean, Chris is the deal guy there. He sets these up, he finds them and so forth. And he said that, and it wasn't really a surprise, but if you compare how other software gets acquired or displayed inside of a larger space, even like one of the early acquisitions was Vladimir Prelevek's managed WP, which I knew Vladimir when he first started that thing, and it's amazing. When they got swallowed up by GoDaddy, Vladimir stayed his bare minimum and he was out of there. And I can't speak for him, but it would be clear to anybody in the business is because they didn't give him the kind of, you run the company like you want to run the company that liquidweb is apparently wanting to do. And that was a big point that Chris emphasized, is that they want the founders to feel free to operate their businesses in the same way, but now they have a financial backer and some personal security and maybe, you know, that kind of a thing that would come from selling to a larger entity. So.
Interesting. Can we, although it's not in the show notes, can we touch on, because it kind of came across my radar only at the weekend when I was listening to my I was doing some gardening, and a podcast, the Post Status podcast came on and I listened to it. Do you mind if we just segue there for a minute? Because this week it was in fact announced that Brian Krosgaard is kind of moving on. Corey in the podcast that I listened to kept referencing what Brian is going to do. And I think I kind of gathered what he was going to do, but I'm not sure if that's been publicly announced. It probably has. But I really, really liked listening to what Corey was saying about what they're going to do with that community. You know, the fact that he wants to do everything with other people instead of trying to be a solopreneur. He wants to carry on the community, improve it in some ways that he feels are worthwhile. We don't really mention Post Status all that much, but if you go over to poststatus.com, it's the most vibrant of WordPress communities. And, you know, you got the likes of Matt Mullenweg hanging out in there, but Corey's taken the helm. I think he went from let's say it was 50%. He was a partner, and now he seems to be the man. So I don't know if Corey's watching this or will ever hear about it, but congratulations. I hope Brian, you know, I hope whatever he's moving on to is meaningful and enjoyable. But Corey, good luck with all that.
Yeah, something with crypto. Sounds like.
Yes. Yeah. That was what I kind of had in my head as well.
Yeah, Brian did a great job making that business community really very a safe space for people to discuss things around businesses. And I was at his at the conference, the Post Status conference in 2017. It was so long ago, but it's really still all the connections that I made there are still very prominent in my life. So it's I like that community. And if you want to join, it's only $99 a year. Yeah, and you get to hang out with a lot of cool people from the WordPress community, professional community. Yeah,
they do a great job of curating the news and editorializing it so that it's, you know, really, really easy to understand what's been going on each and every week. Paul Lacey, oh bless you, Paul. He's dropped in to say sorry he couldn't be there today. Catch up later. Yes, indeed. Good luck with this week, and we'll catch up later. And Cameron says, is this the longest time we've ever been without a WP Tavern article? Well, Cameron, you don't have to wait too much longer, because here we are. We've got the first WP Tavern article of the week. Yeah, we plumb into WP Tavern each and every week. So this story kind of seemed to break and then keep breaking and then keep breaking. I honestly think that every single WordPress, anywhere that produces any kind of WordPress news, picked up on this one. This is just such an interesting story, and it really speaks to me, at least, of a complete disconnect between the developer and the users of a plugin. So quick backstory. Profile Press, during the course of last week at some point, released an update. And seemingly, I confess that I didn't have the previous plugin, but it was an avatar plugin. It was called WP User Avatar, and it did one thing, and it did one thing well, which we've already discussed is exactly what we want from a plugin. It allowed you to amend the user avatars so that you could have like more customization and choice about what the avatar did. So basically, it did a tiny thing. During the course of the week, it got updated, and it would appear that a full membership plugin got bolted into it, including a bunch of upsells and advertising. Now, I haven't gone and looked at this plugin to any great extent, but really, what were they thinking? I don't know. It just seems like such an odd one. I mean, fine, put that in after 2 months of sending messaging to your email list that this is about to happen. But if you've got an avatar plugin and that's all you want a plugin for, you don't want a membership plugin with all the potential breaks and code problems that may exist in there. So I feel that they really misstepped. I don't know what's happened. The guy that is behind the plugin actually came into our group. I feel that it was an exercise that he was doing around the community, trying to shore up the damage and try to explain that they're listening and da-da-da. But it feels like, okay, I'm sorry, I think you might have burned some bridges here. And the WordPress community react as they do when they get cross. They click the one button. So they go over to WordPress.org, and instead of having the 5, honestly, it swung. I don't know if anybody can see it on the WordPress.org repo at the moment what level they were at, but it went from very positive, this previous plugin, to a complete tidal wave of ones with just 1 or 2 words. So anyway, what are your thoughts on this, Birgit? Let's start with you.
Yeah, it's definitely a bait and switch scenario that somebody's really abusing the system quite extensively. And it's not something that, okay, just because it's legal doesn't mean it's okay, or just because you can, you should. I don't, so if somebody got burned with it and is still looking for a nice user, WP user avatar, I would point them to John James Jacoby's plugin pages, and it's also called WP User Avatars with an S, and it still does exactly what it's supposed to do in that. And we use it on some of the sites that we have where communities have come together. And that also tells you I'm still waiting for that list of trusted plugin resources or trusted plugin developers. But of course, that always can change. Yeah. So having a plan B for any of your plugins is definitely something as a WordPress user that you definitely have to come to terms with it. Yeah.
Spencer, any thoughts on this? I bet you do.
Yeah, this is textbook example of what not to do. The twofold problem, of course, is if you are putting a free plugin into the repository, you need to understand, and this is saying it politely, that your audience is a bunch of freeloaders. So if you take a bunch of freeloaders, there was a graph at one time on YouTube, a video that it was about dating, but it applies. It was, like hot versus crazy, somebody you're dating. Well, in WordPress, it's how much they pay versus how crazy they are. If you are putting a plugin in the repository that's a popular plugin, you've got thousands upon thousands of psychotically crazy people. And you had a plugin that did one thing great. It literally just put, 4 choices, pick what your default avatar is, which, by the way, perfect example of what we were just referring to at the beginning of this show about how that's a solution that WordPress should have had sorted out by now. Can you imagine any other platform, SaaS platform, where putting an avatar by default is like not an option yet after 15 years? Well, welcome to WordPress.
You're welcome to program it.
So the number one problem is completely misunderstanding the nature of your client. You've got crazy people that expect everything under the sun, versus had he been charging $100 for the plugin, he probably would have gotten away with it as like a genius move, because $100 people would have been, that's amazing value you've added. The free people are like, you took away my toy and I'm going to punish you. But the second problem is, instead of coming in with a complete mea culpa, which should have been the only thing that this fella did, I'm not going to mention him, you can see his name in there, he came in with guns blazing like Rambo, like, I'm going to show all you guys that you're all wrong and look at all this thing. Because what they really did, as Birgit rightly pointed out, is they had a big audience for a free plugin. They acquired some software or developed themselves that they wanted to charge money. They thought, oh, let's just shove that entire, turkey inside of the chicken, inside of the duck, and call it a turducken. And when they did that and everybody freaked out, rightly so, then he decided to tell everybody that they're wrong. And, hilarity ensues. This developer has basically toasted his future in WordPress, if you ask me. There was a fella back in the early days called Chris Pearson. In the early days, I mean, like back when we were all sitting around a campfire making, s'mores with the original Automattic team. There was, very few people. And he had a theme called Thesis. And this was before Matt decided to drop the hammer on anything not being a GPL license. And Chris Pearson at the time was like myself, maybe. I mean, I could see parts of myself in his behavior. It was like, who's this Matt Mullenweg character? Because Matt was just a civilian at the time. And he decided to take on Matt. And this is legendary. I mean, it's in the records. He took on Matt, and then he saw the Matt Mullenweg that none of us see these days, because he remains very nicely hidden behind his, the mask or the wall. Matt took Chris Pearson and did a Tony Soprano on him in public. And Chris disappeared. He's never been seen since or heard from since. And while this is a smaller example of it, it is still an example of, if you're going to play in this ecosystem, you have to lay on the ground to please people. And sometimes that actually works in your favor, taking one for the team. But you also have to realize that nobody forgets anything here, because it's just a chit-chatty little, coffee house, and everybody remembers all the stories and all the people. And I can't believe it, because it's so many years now. It's 15 plus years. But those of us who are still around, I mean, there's a few stories that are legendary. And this isn't like going to last very long as far as people's memory, but it'll be very hard for this person to come out with any product in the future and get the kind of trust that they need after having made this mistake. Yeah. And it's too bad, because the product itself was a great product. But I want to use a metaphor too, not to bring me into it, but I bring this up as a metaphor. One of the things that I taught in my early days of WordPress, when we were teaching freelance web designers how to sell into this very weird space where everything is free, okay, or presumably free, is to realize that if you ask people for money, you have to, at all costs, to your own wallet, protect your early adopters. So recently, and shortly after being on your show, Nathan, I made a decision to shift the positioning of that LaunchFlows plugin and do two things I wouldn't have normally done. I lowered the price overall, but I also made a lifetime offer on the product. In doing so, I took the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of already existing paid customers, and I made them all lifetime people for free. Now, why? Because that was the only logical thing that I could do to prevent sticking my thumb in the eye of all the people who agreed, whether, even if it was $97, the product was $300 when I did this. But like, I did it because this exact situation could have gone the other way had I decided to go, oh, lifetime deal is $300. Then everybody who paid me $300 for a year would be completely ripped off.
Right.
And maybe it cost me up front this year, but I guarantee you the comments are different about who protected their customers or who protected their interests. And I think, especially for a free plugin, cost you nothing. He could have come out and just put a banner that said, hey, check out this free product, and here's a 50% off discount coupon if you want to give it a try.
That's the bit I just don't get, is why not just make a, I mean, everybody hates ads, when ads go into the WP admin, there's a furor about that, but maybe that was there would have been a bit of controversy about that, but not quite on the scale of this. And I think you're right. I don't really know. I don't wish somebody ill at all, but I think you may be right in that perhaps bridges have been burnt, which will be difficult to rebuild. And let's hope that they can come around. And
people are very forgiving, by the way. If you mess up and you come clean, people are very willing to come to your defense. The problem was he came in guns a-blazing, and then continued guns a-blazing. And as soon as somebody does that, they've kind of sealed their fate a little bit. Everybody
digs in. Yeah, it's not that you make mistakes; it's what you do next that defines you.
Yeah. Paul Lacey, honestly, why don't you just click on the StreamYard link in the show notes and come on. Had this plugin on 2 sites. He said, I just disabled it, didn't want the hassle, even to look through and see the impact. He then goes on to say, I think this is a really bad thing to do, but I think they will make money in sales from this. Yeah, maybe you're right. So I wouldn't be surprised if you weighed the trade-offs up and down. Yep.
Yeah.
And,
Think about.
and
sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, just one last thing quickly. And then he says, good move, Spencer, lifetime advocates, even if they no longer use your product. Don't often see this with a lifetime deal. So he's applauding you for that. Birgit, sorry.
I forgot what I wanted to say.
Okay. Well, anyway, we often get these little dramas, but this one seemed of a different fashion. I've yet to see people completely upend what their plugin does and ram a load of stuff in. So be warned if you're thinking about doing this exact
it really was.
thing.
If you look at the interface, because this was such a simple plugin, the screenshot, there were literally all you saw was just 5 choices for picking an avatar. Yeah. And you go in now, and it was a multi-level dynamic Ajax dashboard.
Yeah, it's like a tabbed interface with multiple deep layers of different settings. And maybe you want that, but probably you just wanted some avatars. It would
be a freak out. I mean, can you imagine you come in your dashboard and you're like, what the hell? I want to bring in something else because I don't want to pick on them particularly, but they seem to be continuing to do this. So I did a screenshot, and we didn't talk about it over at the other podcast I'm on, but so one of the worst offenders is Yoast. And what Yoast did this week, and I don't know if anybody else noticed this, but Yoast now has invented a new way to be obnoxious beyond belief. If you have a plugin install of Yoast, and I'm not sure if it's on the free or the pro, they now create a dynamic footer across your entire admin interface to market upsells of other Yoast connectivity plugins.
I did not see that.
Yeah. No. So I want to get into the details of this, but I did inspect it with my inspector, and I saw it was coming from Yoast because I freaked out that all of a sudden I have an entire, and not just like one line. I mean, a solid 2.5 inches high gray dynamic footer. It thankfully could be dismissed. That says, oh, blah, blah, blah. I see you're using the whatever plugin. You should get the Yoast connectivity to this plugin. And it was in particular with Elementor. So I wasn't sure if it was coming from Elementor or Yoast. When I inspected it, it was coming from the Yoast's plugin. Shame on them. Shame, 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 shame. Because it's one thing when Jetpack does this and says, do as we say, not as I do. But like when independent plugins feel that they can just stick their thumb in everybody's eye, that's exactly what we're talking about, where you have a simple little 5 avatar little section in one party website, and you wake up the next morning, by the way, using auto updates because that's what we're supposed to do, right? And next thing you know, you've got this 4-inch banner across all your client sites trying to get them to buy other plugins.
Can I ask, was it an overlay or was it buried at the bottom of the content?
It was a dynamic, I think it was a div. In other words, it was part of the markup of the admin interface. Right. It wasn't a modal. It was literally, they changed the markup. It was dismissal. Dismissible. I can grab the picture of it even here. Hold on.
Have you actually thought that it might be you're part of the testing group?
No, I mean, I was very concerned when I saw it to make sure I didn't point fingers wrongfully. And I haven't fully fleshed it out. But
because I have not seen that on any of our sites. So it might be a connection with
I think if you have Yoast and Elementor, it shows up. Yeah. Oh, okay, so it's a Yoast Elementor combo, or maybe they've got this. Maybe there's this conditional logic. If user equals Spencer Forman, show irritating advert.
I'll tell you this, which anybody who knows me knows that I'll be the first one to scream to the world and everybody who listens to me about what you did that was great, but nobody would want to do that to me. And because
I'm going to write a plugin called
I'll be like, here we go. Here's a
and it's just going to do adverts.
let me do a quick screen grab. I don't know if I can.
You have to click the.
It's really a troll move.
Let me see if I can just drag this in with the thing, because it says new Yoast SEO for Elementor. Get started with Yoast.
That's the element of it, yeah.
I feel that we are like you were saying earlier, Spencer. I feel that we are a community that don't enjoy this kind of stuff on a level that perhaps we would probably be more accepting of it if it was in our Android phone. I know that on the iPhone side of things that's a bit different, but you install an app and maybe it's, I don't know, Evernote or something, and occasionally Evernote sticks something in your notifications UI that says, have you thought about upgrading, or we've got this new feature, and you sort of seem to be able to cope with that a little bit. I guess the problem here is that you don't quite know. So in the case that you're highlighting, Spencer, you're not entirely sure, is this just me that's seeing this, or are my clients that I've spent absolutely ages just getting them to figure out WordPress, suddenly they see this thing and they think something's broken? It's broken. I mean, that's never been there before.
Somebody hacked my site.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, they relate to each other insofar as when you talk about the accessibility issues, when you talk about the things like with the auto updates, right? Whenever you have that scenario, you're trying to give people trust that the system won't allow things like this to happen. And then if you have a plugin author who is Automattic, sure, everybody knows Jetpack is breaking all the rules.
Or awesome plugins, they do the same thing.
Right, but when you get one or two of the big name plugin authors to think that they can do stuff that a regular plugin author would get completely banned for doing, that's where I start to have big problems, because again, Yoast is a multiple offender here. This is not the first time they've done this. I'm trying to post this to my Ghiazzo.
Well, the plugin guidelines actually allow that. So it's kind of the expectation that people should kind of restrain themselves. I don't know. Yeah.
I've often thought that in the same way that if you log into something like, I'm trying to think of a good example. Let's say that you log into something like Basecamp or Asana or something like that. There's a little bell icon always, isn't there? And the bell icon is you have notifications. There's stuff that you need to deal with over here. And until you go there, you don't know what it is. So it could be anything. And sometimes it is advertising from them. But usually it's things like, I don't know, you've got a reminder for something that you need to take care of. I've often thought that including a notifications UI in WordPress where people can push that stuff, and you can go there if you like, or you completely dismiss it. So the notifications could be advertising, and it gives them people a legitimate channel to push that stuff, but we don't. So
check that image out if you want. You can post it.
So John Bosinger is actually spearheading a unified notification system for the WordPress core. And if you really feel so strongly about, and it would be really helpful if you could share stop by at the Slack channel and give your input there. And if you have developer skills and chops for WordPress core and you feel strongly about it, go there, because they need help. Yeah, it's something that not everybody is. It's not a cool thing, but it's also dealing with legacy code. So it's a real technical challenge that you will come up about, and also the political side of it. Yeah, is going to be really interesting. So if you want a challenge, that's definitely, I challenge you, Spencer.
What's interesting to me
be
is
part of that, because on the other hand, if you don't give those outlets like the advertising for Yoast or awesome, what's her name? Awesome, the Sid Balky's outfit.
Awesome Motive.
Awesome Motive, yeah, they have some advertising as well, and they even hijack the menu items for that. So, but on the other hand, you want people to sustain their work in the ecosystem. You need to have that allowed in some way or other. And so you cannot kind of just rile about it, and then the ecosystem is not sustainable, because if you don't pay the developer or some people, and for Yoast it worked out. Yeah, they have over 5 million users, and I think their conversion rate is about 1%. But that's kind of builds their company, and they have been very good in keeping their brand on that SEO. They sold all the others plugin that they had 10 years ago. So I think there is a case to be made for, so profile press does not happen all the time, because people are kind of, okay, I know how this works. So I get my outlets in my admin screens, in my own admin screen, not in other people's. And I understand, though, being upset about the footer. I totally understand that. Yeah. And I don't like it. But I also not use Elementor. So I'm kind of, it's that, I'm glad I didn't suffer that. But I think having there is no, you don't know these things from the start. Yeah, so and there's a lot of legacy going on, and I've wished John Bosinger a lot of patience and a lot of oomph to persistence to get this going and get somewhere to a first iteration to be published, so the larger community can comment on it.
I think it's a really nice
wait about
project.
those comments.
Yeah, we actually featured the screenshots of the proposed thing. It was months and months and months ago, so I don't know how that project's going on, but I do like the idea of like a defined color palette, a defined place. So basically the normal notifications that we get, there's a little tiny colored strip down the side and you get text on a gray background with a little border and so on. All of that feels really like a sensible place to put it. But I do think it's a good idea to have a notifications area where the advertising could go. What about this? I've mentioned this before. What about freemium versions of plugins where you allow advertising in, but you get it cheaper? I mean,
the whole problem boils down to placement and expectation. Okay. And it's metaphorically to me a lot like what we're talking about now with if you use any of like Apple News or on Android on your phone, how the various publishers for some reason in 2021 have not figured out how to consolidate with one service. If I could pay one service $25 or $50 a month, and then if I read any article from The Atlantic versus this or that, they would get a percentage of that. That would be so much better than what happens now, which is I see a link, I click it, and then I can't see the article because I have to pay the New York Times $1 a month, which I'm not going to do. It's a pain in the rear end to pay 20 publishers $1 each. I don't want to manage that. Similarly, in WordPress, Birgit's point is well taken, and I think you're as well, Nathan, that there's a reason that the freemium people have to have a mechanism. Now, there's a great plugin like Freemius, right? Vova Feldman, a colleague of mine, has done a great job with building a business around that, where if you have a plugin that's a Freemius plugin, there's an interface that kicks in specific to that plugin. The offense that I take is that we've got a hypocritical scenario where it's graffiti on the public building's wall. All right, you've got this admin interface, and that certain plugins feel it's their right to go in and do like, I'm going to go ahead and put the 3-foot advertisement for my product at the bottom of your admin interface, when at the same time you're trying to give a consistent experience to your client. Your client now has to see the spam of that. First of all, that's wrong. Second of all, is that you got other offenders that do things I bitched and moaned about, where you install the plugin and it takes you away from the actual place you were in the admin interface to their introductory whatever screen, which I find also offensive, because it's like, look, if you want to just teach me, let me go to your name in the admin menu and there'd be like, get started. That would be a good way to do it. But to keep moving people around and spray painting here, there, and everywhere, it becomes a free-for-all. But it doesn't, because Automattic comes in and they will kill any plugin that does that, except for Jetpack or Yoast, or in the case of Elementor, which I find it incredibly offensive, but I also feel like they're going to ultimately fork it. Elementor went one step further. And by the way, I love Elementor. They are the only freemium, they're the only GPL plugin that requires you to have a phone home validation of their pro plugin. Every other pro plugin that I can think of, at least mainstream, allows you to continue using the pro plugin when you have the software without registering it. Elementor requires you to do an authentication every time, which is a huge leap of chutzpah, but they can get away with it.
And it's not GPL.
It's not GPL because of that, but they get away with it because this is where it's going to go. Elementor may be the first plugin to do kind of like LiquidWeb was with Nexus and so forth. They may be the first ones to say, we're just going to fork WordPress and we'll make the Elementor platform. And I'd be one of the first people to go over there, to be honest.
I see that coming, that Elementor is going to do more cloud hosting because there's so much more money in it than in software development.
I mean, isn't it like suddenly the tail chasing the dog? Like if you have all the hassles of Automattic doing crazy stuff and they haven't fixed the accessibility and they haven't fixed the avatar, and it's 2021 and there's the job board that has 8 million engineer jobs for whereas Elementor is making money hand over foot. Wouldn't it make more sense for them to just grab WordPress's core and then they start managing it themselves as a fork?
Absolutely. But on the other hand, I have not seen any Elementor contributor doing anything for WordPress except advertising against it. So
why waste their time? They can just do,
but it's a community, They're a community of people who build it, and it's not only Automattic. There are only 70 positions on the core WordPress, not on core, on the whole WordPress system, that are done by Automattic. There are about 100 other businesses who contribute to WordPress, and
but it doesn't work that way anymore. I mean, having a personal relationship with many of the core contributors in various capacities, the environment there is schizophrenic. In other words, it's reached the point of maturity. Like, go back to the Linux Red Hat days, right, where you had open source software as an operating system, and at some point the community got lost to the corporate interests. The companies that took it on as a corporate project applied the logic of a corporation, the profitability logic. They put the right people on the job, and the product went hands and feet above the open source one. I think we see a similar thing here, is that you can claim they're not playing nice or contributing, but if you ask anybody who's tried to contribute to the core project, who's a mature developer who's been there for years, no, but I mean, like, as part of your regular endeavor, not just like it's like banging your head against the wall, versus if you went over to like an Elementor and you said, how can I contribute? They would pay you fairly for what you're doing. They would give you benefits. They would give you an incentive to go towards a common goal. Things would get fixed. Whereas in WordPress,
it's a free road. Yeah. So
you know what I mean? Like,
I don't think that a software that only caters for 4 million, has a much more freedom than a software that caters for 400 million websites. And there is legacy there. Elementor had the good advantage to start out when WordPress was mature. There was a mature system, there was a mature ecosystem, and then they built on top of it. And that's totally, that's kind of brilliant.
Just like
they will go the Wix way. They will go the Squarespace way. They will become a closed system. And that's not what WordPress is about. WordPress is not a closed system, and you can rail about the Automattic as you want. They build on the core first, and then build it into their SaaS product. So, I don't know who's contributing more to the ecosystem: those who build the closed system, or those who kind of adhere to the open system.
I don't think it's gonna be that way, though. I think what's gonna happen is it's not closed or open. I think what it's gonna be is that you have a live by the sword, die by the sword problem for Automattic. Because it's open source, unless they fork their own thing and make it a completely closed version, you can tell that their venture capitalists are pushing them through Jetpack. Jetpack is the Trojan horse to try to get everybody into a pay-as-you-play system that is completely controlled and contained, even inside of their open source. Their Achilles heel here, the thing that they've made that they can't undo, is that anybody can fork the core. And I think whether they actually make you pay to get in or not at Elementor, they can do a better job of adding features and smoothing out the rough spots. And even with Gutenberg, finally fix Gutenberg as part of the core offering, if that's what they wanted to, so that it complements Elementor instead of this, banging your head against each other phenomena right now.
I'm gonna have to ring the bell on this one, because we're gonna be.
You got us rocking and rolling on that.
Yeah. Wow! And it all started off from like a plugin updating avatars. The only thing that I would add is that I would be curious if we were to get into the habit of allowing adverts. I wonder how that might multiply. And what I mean by that is, Spencer, you mentioned that this advert was yay high. And then, of course, you can imagine that 6 weeks later, somebody will come out with an advert which is yay plus 1 high. And eventually, I feel that there'll just be this dreadful clutter. And so my position, at least, is I prefer when the companies use other channels, email marketing and other techniques to put their adverts in. And I respond to that much more so than I do by seeing things like that. And these tactics of pushing things into plugins and trying to get into existing users that they didn't really have a business reaching out to because they never found them through the correct channel, if you like. That's kind of my position. And
I think it'd be standardized and simple if they just put a basic, every plugin gets a button that says, we have a pro thing, click here to get it. So in other words, you have your plugin, you have the plugin page, you even have inside of your admin dashboard. Everybody is equal. You can always have a button, and it could be green or red or whatever. But the point is, it's in the place it's supposed to be, so that if you're on any free plugin, you always know you can click and then go to their advertising page. As long as it doesn't show up by itself in the interface, that would solve all the problems, because then you are allowing free people to market their plugins without pretending that they shouldn't. And they could, by the way, do that on the WordPress repository. They should allow it in the repository page to just be like, here's our pro version, and stop pretending like people can do this for free forever.
I think we are living an experiment, and clearly there's opinions on one side and opinions on the other, and for today at least this remains unresolved. But that was certainly
been unresolved for 15 years.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we're not going to solve it in 59 minutes. That's for sure. But it is fascinating because it's nice. Honestly, it is quite nice me sitting here listening to these contrary opinions, because you both obviously have thought about it. You haven't come to this through, well, I'm just going to make something up. You've got opinions, and they matter to you, and they may differ, but I think that was quite a nice exchange that you both just had. So thank you. That was good.
These are all like first world fun conversations. These
yes.
Like there are but a billion other more important things that are relevant. But when we're in the context,
Let's move on then and talk about some other stuff, because I'm just going to mention this very briefly, because I was lucky enough this week to interview a very nice chap called Benjamin Intal, who is behind a plugin suite called Stackable. I interviewed him for the WP Tavern podcast. It's about 40 minutes long, so if you're interested in his take on where he thinks blocks are going and the whole Gutenberg thing, I mean, you can only say so much in 40 minutes, but I feel that in that 40 minutes we covered quite a lot of ground. Why he's betting his business on blocks, as I've said in there. So you can find that by going to wptavern.com/podcast, and it's number 3. So thank you, Ben, for joining me on that episode. I really enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it as well. Yeah, it was a good conversation about the early days of Gutenberg and now what's coming up. Yeah,
really interesting about all the kind of blind alleys that they went down, developing things more or less in the absence of documentation, creating solutions to things which then Core came back and invented, so they could unpick the stuff that they did. And it was just really interesting. There was a lot on the line, gambling on Gutenberg at that time. I feel that you're on much more steady ground now if you were to launch a product like he's got, but obviously he takes the what's the word, he's in a different position because he's already got an audience there, and he took the early gamble, and it seems to be paying off for the guys.
Well, quite the early adopter. Yes. I think his plugin came out before even Gutenberg was in Core. So
it did. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, he was mentioning the fact that they didn't even know when they released the first version whether it was going to make it into Core, which really does put them into a different category. So anyway, go and have a listen to that if you're interested. But we'll stay with Gutenberg, because I want to talk to Birgit about episode number 44, or changelog number 44. First of all, Birgit, can you just give us a high level? I should rewind a little bit and say that this is from Gutenberg Times. Although I mentioned it at the beginning, you may not know that Birgit and various other people connected with the Gutenberg's Time project do an awful lot of work trying to keep people like me and hopefully you up to date. Do you just want to give us a sort of like a 10,000-mile bird's eye view of what the purpose of Gutenberg Times is, what kind of stuff you cover and all of that?
Well, the Gutenberg Times came out of the early days of Gutenberg, but it was more like curating all the voices around Gutenberg that actually work with the system, that try new things, that show what would be possible, and also go a little bit beyond. That was at the beginning. And then now that it's in Core, it actually keeps up with the new things that will come in the future, like full site editing. We have been writing or collecting information about the full site editing since April, I think, 2020 or 2020. Sorry, I got this. And have demos in between, and talk with the developers on live Q&As, and then also from the community, who's doing what plugin. We also talk. I write about. There are some new courses out there for the full site editing. For instance, that was in the newsletter. The Changelog podcast is more talking about what was released in the plugin with a developer, Jagos Cholkovsky, who's has been a developer on the infrastructure side more. It was started out with Mark Urain, who was on the design part, and we switched co-host about 4 episodes back, and every 2 weeks when Gutenberg comes out on a Wednesday, and we will record the podcast on Friday, and we talk through the changelog, as it says, beyond what's just in the interface changes. So developer can catch up, the implementers can catch up what was in the works. In the 44, we talk quite a bit about the Theme.json file that will come into 5.8. It has left the experimental stage and is now ready for theme developers to start experimenting with it. It will not be in an interface at all at the moment, but it's in the plugin. It will come into core, so theme developers can actually start building block-based themes and use the global settings and styles for it. What comes on the interface in 5.8 is pretty much a template editor that right now is being tested quite a bit and should also work for classic themes, not only for block-based themes. So you get a little template editing section in your sidebar in your editor. It said edit template or create a new one. So you can create a separate landing page for some product that you want to sell, or some service, or just an event that is a bit outside of the normal design of your website. So you can kind of get rid of the site header, get rid of the site and put a cover on top of it, and have that one page be the title in the page, for instance. That's how it works. And there's a lot of infrastructure underneath it that will in 5.9 or in 6.0 become the full site editor, as we've seen in demos at the WordCamp US already. That was not a 10-foot thing. Get quite into the details, but sorry about that.
I was just going to ask about that. For those people who are listening who haven't come across it before, or pressed play on it before, or gone to the website, would you mentioned that it was developers tune in and part of your community, and also implementers. Is that true? I mean, could anybody literally come in and drop into the podcast, or do you need a fairly decent backstory with Gutenberg, or could I, bring my I don't know, my mother along and say we're gonna listen to a podcast about Gutenberg? Do we need to know a bit?
No, it's definitely not for the beginner change on Gutenberg. It's the listeners are mostly developers of those that have been on Gutenberg quite a bit, because it's really going down into the what's new and what is the team talking about. That's another section on the podcast. If you are a kind of a beginner or a content creator, I think the newsletter and the website itself will help you much more in finding additional information about what's happening around the block editor. The changelog is definitely too specific for those that are in the thick of it, I would say.
Yeah. I feel that you've reached some kind of tipping point, Birgit, because no matter where I go on social media, I mean, my social media is completely aligned to WordPress. If it's not about WordPress, it's not getting in my feed, and I just see your website and your podcast getting mentioned over and over again now. So it's been a lot
sooner
of hard
or later,
work, I'm sure.
But we've seen that in it kind of went into hockey stick quite a bit.
Yeah. Oh well, congratulations. So
go to
go to gutenbergtimes.com if you want to keep up with the latest developments in Gutenberg. And obviously, we're looking at something which was featured last week.
Thank you.
But Peter Ingersoll, I don't know if you saw that. I did put it up on the screen. He says the Changelog is an excellent, friendly podcast to stay on top of all things Gutenberg block editor. So thank you, Peter, for your kind comments. Just curious about that, actually, Birgit. Do you foster a community? I know that you do the lives and all of those kind of things. Do you have a place like a Slack channel or like a Facebook group? You just turn up, consume the content, and move on, right? Okay.
Right. Yeah. Well, you can leave comments on the website. Yep. That's certainly there. But I have not found yet the what's outside of the Slack of WordPress. Yeah, I think that's the best way to get into the community part is if you actually participate in the WordPress community about that. Yeah, that's where I come from. I was a community deputy for 5 years. So the people that work on it are really nice people, very friendly.
Yeah. Have you heard of Mastodon?
Yes.
I'm sort of trying out Mastodon to see how it works. I quite like the idea of having a completely federated version of Twitter, but I think it's an uphill struggle. Everybody's using Twitter.
Yeah, that's with all the social networks. Yeah, the network effect is really high.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, thank you for that. Anything to add to that, Spencer, or should we move on?
First of all, I didn't know Birgit publishes Gutenberg Times, so now this is a great resource for me. And many of the people that you've interviewed are people that I've interacted with. I want to say one thing about just Gutenberg versus Elementor. I personally feel that once the outside intervention, like the Gutenberg Times and all the participants you've interviewed, get into it, the Gutenberg will be the force to be reckoned with as far as like accomplishing things. But right now, the biggest problem is that it doesn't know whether it's an editor or whether it's a page builder. And the interface itself, although the features are there with like Munir's plugin, make it amazing, the core features are also really troublesome, like the fact that you have to roll a mouse over the grab handle in order to see a pop-up that shoots out of the thing that now you move your mouse over. That kind of behavior is what caused people like me to just literally face palmer, at this stage of the game. And I know you're addressing it and you're talking with people about it, but it's like, come on. It's like 3 years already. Get the gosh darn interface fixed so that it works like all the other 6 page builders, at least like everything is visible. Then we can at least have a fair conversation about what it does. But the fact that we're still debating the interface and that like you can't drag a drag and drop thing without moving up and down like a Rubik's Cube is problematic, because that won't happen in a private company. That's the difference we were talking about in our last conversation. And so I have full faith that it's going to happen eventually, but along the way, they're just shooting themselves in the foot at Automattic by not applying $1 million or $2 million to bringing in people to just get this done,
It is sorry, Birgit, you carry on.
It's definitely a fair point. Yeah, it's not like when you get software, you want it to be finished. Yeah, and that's not how
you just want it to work like expected for the basics, is what I mean.
Right, the expectations are kind of there is an idea, a philosophy idea that says expectations are premeditated resentment, and so kind of. You're responsible for your own expectations, but not everybody needs to meet your expectations, and you probably tell this to your kids too. But it's so it's the problem is that it's developed in the open, that all the mistakes are there. Everybody can see the mistakes, and everybody can talk about how to do it better. Also, there is this whole legacy, that nobody else had to deal with. That the new page builder is just on top of WordPress, but all the things are not integrated into core. But you need to integrate it into core. That's one thing. And of course, the interface changes, because we went from a post editor that does just a paragraph and a list and these kind of things to a template editor, and the interface is supposed to stay the same, but they didn't know in 3 years ago what in 5 years the template editor would look like, and nobody knows that, how that all evolves. So it's a constant iteration process. And it's a fair concern that if you have the plugin installed, sometimes you get some surprises. Only the core plugin editor, the core block editor is actually the one that is released. Everything else is making mistakes in the public, and that is really disconcerting for a lot of people. I can see that.
Those are fair points.
It's an interesting debate as well, because I had this conversation. Sorry to plug the podcast again, but I interviewed Anne McCarthy on number 2, and we addressed this point. And one of the things that came out is, yes, we're developing in the open. Number 2, that we've got 40+% of the web which we simply can't break, which is just huge. And the other third point has completely gone out of my head, but it's why I started talking about it's completely gone. But it was very important, and it probably would have ended this debate for good.
I mean, your point is fair about the iterating. I myself make a point of, let's say, with the things that I've produced, I say I'm flying in the airplane and we're going to work on the engines in the air. All right, that's fair. But what I'm getting at is, from a self-interest point of view, the focus, the triage of not at least establishing that the mechanics of the visual interface do things that are by now definitive. Like, for example, a drag handle is a drag handle. If you move your mouse over a drag handle, nowhere in the universe does something pop up out of it. That is not about priorities or changing development. That is like, a square is a square, a circle is a circle. You drive on the right side of the road in the US and the left side of the road in the UK. And if you are having people doing the opposite, you're going to have accidents and confusion. And I'm not talking about future features. I'm talking about that, because I do believe that at the end of the day, the basic editor would do really well, and many people would never have to leave Gutenberg and go to Elementor. But not right now. Right now,
no,
madness.
No. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying. Yeah, it's not done yet. It's not going to be done maybe in 2020. It's going to be 21. I'm still a last year kind of thing.
If they threw $1 million at it, it would be done this year. If Automattic's VCs threw $1 million,
so if you keep Automattic out of it for a moment, just because the argument doesn't work, the argument doesn't work. It's not a closed system; it's an open system. So it will be community driven at some point. And if you ever made it to the GitHub repository, you would see how many discussions are actually about the interface. Yeah, so it's really mind-boggling what all needs to be considered. Comparing it with Elementor in 2021, when not even a first version of the template editor is actually visible, it's kind of something like,
But I'm saying, like, if you compare the words,
let's have the conversation in 2022.
I've remembered my third point.
Yes.
Yeah, let's grab it.
I've remembered it, and it wasn't that good, but I'm going to say it anyway. It was simply that, and I think somebody alluded to it earlier. I think it might have been you, Birgit. The Elementor thing, and the Beaver Builder thing, and the Poodle Press thing, and the Breezy thing is a silo thing. So what it means is that they can chuck any amount of resource on it, and so long as they don't break their own thing, all is well. And they can really iterate quickly on that. You know, we're gonna, like you say, we're gonna put $1 million over here, and there's the 20 people who are going to get on and improve that aspect of the UI that everybody's moaning about. It's just a different project, isn't it? And like Birgit says, it's sort of done in the open.
But they've done this. I mean, Birgit, your point, I respect your point, but I disagree about this part of it. Automattic has the resources which they've historically spent as they wish on their own pet projects and priorities. For example, they have spent it on Jetpack. They have spent it on accessories for Jetpack. They've spent it on WooCommerce and all the accessories for WooCommerce. They've spent it on WordPress.com. They've spent it on VIP. They've spent it on all the WordCamps. They've spent it on paying for partying at some of the WordCamps. What they have not done is paid any adults to be the managers, to be the referees. And instead, with all due respect to what you're saying, because I'm not in an argument with you, We are no longer a bunch of kids sitting around the campfire like we were in 2006, where we go, hey, what do you think, Birgit? I don't know, Spence. Let's do this. Okay, let's do it. When you have 400,000 people in the GitHub repository, which I see every day, arguing over stuff, and there's not one counselor in the camp, nothing gets done. And you say 2022, I say add 10 years onto it, because by then the rest of us will be living on Mars with holographic interfaces for our websites by the time the Gutenberg team decides that a drag handle doesn't pop something up. Or Automattic could spend $1 million and hire a couple people to prioritize the core of what is this? How does it work? We drive in our lane like every other component in the SaaS world. And then all of the other features can take time, sure, whatever, like let's all peace and love. But when the basics don't work 3-4 years into it, you lose us. You know what I mean?
So I don't think that you're right that the basics don't work. It works very well.
The interface to use Gutenberg, my experience is I go in there and I'm lost.
Drag and drop works. Padding is coming. That's all coming. It's
no,
not
I'm
something
talking about just how to make an actual layout. Like literally, I'm talking to Munir and all the other people who make plugins. I go into the interface with Classic. Immediately, I know what to do. I go into any other page builder. I went into Oxygen yesterday for the first time ever. Immediately knew what to do because everything performed like its icon said it would. I go into the Gutenberg. It's amazing. I need to roll my mouse over something in order for something else to pop up, and then I got to quickly drag to the left. And that kind of behavior is unacceptable.
I'm gonna maybe Spencer, maybe this is the answer. Moving it on slightly.
I'm going to apply for each of those jobs.
Right? We were talking about Automattic throwing money at the problem. So this is totally off-piste again. This is nothing to do with the prior conversation, but it was of real interest to me when I saw this. I don't even know where I saw it. I think Joe Seffer or somebody may have posted a link saying, if you're looking to work in the WordPress space, we've got some jobs. So I clicked on the link. So this is automattic.com /work with us, work-with us. And I was, right, I'm going to scroll. Okay, here we are. So each one of these lines is a job, an actual job, not like a job which kind of is recurring. This is just a job. And it just keeps going.
You got to look at those on Glassdoor too.
Birgit did some counting. What was it? 93?
93 positions.
93. And many of them, if you look here, the engineering types, front-end JavaScript, WooCommerce, e-commerce, mail, WooCommerce, there's just absolutely boatloads of very technical jobs. So I maybe, Spencer, maybe this is the first sort of lappings on the shore of what you were talking about.
I want to say two things. First of all, I love what Birgit's doing, and I don't want anybody who listens to this to think that I'm being argumentative with you, because I have nothing but love and respect for what you're doing. But we're talking about Automattic here, okay? We're talking about the product, the software, and this healthy debate. I know I'm kind of not the prim and proper usual guest on the show. I'm more antagonistic, but I'm not towards you at all. And I actually love what you're doing with the project, just like all the people you interviewed. So I just want that on record. As far as this, I'm going to be the cynic in the room again and say, go to glassdoor.com and look up these jobs. And you take the same problem that I was just talking about before, and you realize why they have 93 jobs is because A, they don't have a really great environment for people. They don't pay benefits proportional to what they ask of people. And for all the people that I've personally spoken to who have been principals and been on payroll, they find that it's not as satisfying of an outcome as if they went to a private company that had the kind of silo you're referring to. Because at a certain point in time, you get into this weird, what am I doing and why am I doing it? Who am I doing it for problem, where the ship is going in circles. And I'm not saying that's the exact reason for this, but I will say that they've got an opportunity right now to do something about it. The only branch of Automattic that seems to be really killing it, maybe two of them, would be the WooCommerce division and would be the VIP division. But the VIP division works because they've got salespeople that talk to the large corporations, and it's very clear what you're getting for that. And the WooCommerce, because that's the space where everybody needs to be in. But the intermediary stuff, tons of lost opportunities. And I would say that this is ironic. 93 jobs open? Really? What does that say to you guys? Who has 93 open jobs?
Automattic.
I'm just saying, what
a very growing company. Yeah, and
But
if you look at it, there are some of the projects are going to Tumblr, Matrix. These are all acquisitions, and the CC search, the Creative Commons search. Yeah, they need more engineers as well. Yeah, so it's not all WordPress or WooCommerce or Jetpack or something like that.
yeah. You go to
Yeah, I don't know.
Glassdoor
I
and you
don't
can
know
read
if I
about
make the
the job.
connection with having a large roster of job openings with something that's failing. I don't know that I would make that connection. In that, I see that if you're advertising for jobs, you've got available vacancies, and that you would like people to fulfill them. Nothing more than that, really. It's just there's places available, and if you've been tracking the number of employees that Automattic have gone, it is on honestly, I couldn't tell you the exact numbers right now, but I seem to recall that when I was in WordCamp Europe in Berlin in 2019, I think they had about 900, I think I was told. And I think they're more, I'm going to say this number and forgive me if it's woefully wrong. I think they're 1,400 now. And so it has gone up a lot in a couple of years. So it may be that these 93 are just what they can now afford to have. Right. We've got 6 minutes left. So I'm going to do two. I'm going to miss the last one off, and I'm just going to do a couple of community bits, if that's all right. The first one is a WordPress event, free WordPress event called WordSesh. So there's two that we're going to feature today. This one is over at wordsesh.com. This one's happening very soon, in fact, starting tomorrow. Register for free. I confess I do not know the details, but I'm going to just tell you to go to wordsesh.com and you can examine all of the different speakers and what it is that they're speaking about. It's a real laundry list. There's a whole bunch going on. Starts 3 a.m.
Right.
Oh.
For Austria. Australia.
They're doing that.
Australia.
Right. Lovely. So is it the 24-hour model? Okay. Lovely.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's about 3 days. Yeah. So.
Okay. Thank you so much. So that helps. And the last one is WP Engine have got their, what is it called? It's just called Summit 21, I think. Yeah, Summit 2021. That starts on the 24th of June, but registration is now open. So if you fancy getting yourself onto either of those, WordSesh starts tomorrow. WP Engine Summit starting in about a month's time. Oh, that was a fiery episode. It was interesting. Thank you.
Birgit, you're in Florida still, right?
I'm in Florida, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I was going to say, normally your show is so civilized, Nathan, because it's very, very other side of the ocean. But today,
I tell you what, though,
two Americans nice. Yelling at each other.
It is. It's always nice to sort of like it's nice to have contrary opinions, right? And you've presented some of those today, and you were very careful toward the end there too.
I don't think either one of us feel like we're at each other's throat. We're just healthy debate,
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. There are some comments. Maybe we'll just no. We'll just leave those for now because we really are running out of time. We will be back.
Peter Ingersoll. Not all of us Americans are so argumentative. I take full responsibility for being the bumblebee at everyone's picnic when it comes to certain topics. Yeah.
Cameron Jones says, "Is this the WP Builds House of Parliament?" The curious thing, if you're in the House of Parliament, don't you know this about the British parliamentary system? And it may be the case that it's the same in wherever you are. But if you're in the British parliamentary system, you're not actually allowed to talk to anybody else. You have to talk through the chair. So you literally, whenever you address anybody, you have to talk to the chair. So excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Right. So I've fielded this conversation. I've not
parliamentary procedure, as they say.
I've not really got involved in this one.
By the way, I wanted to say Peter brings up a point in his earlier comment about because he seems to be very fond of the block editor. I want to just say on record, I am so hopeful that they get their act together, because I couldn't agree more that the native editor should be the page builder capability that it's aspiring to be. My beef is that all the other private companies seem to have gotten their act together on the basics in a much faster time period. And if you got 93 open jobs and millions of venture capital dollars, maybe you could just make that one little thing move a little quicker so that those of us who want to actually use it don't feel like, But otherwise, I respect his opinion. I think he's got a good point. And I'm not against it.
I'm just kind of really amazed how you missed all the volunteer work and all the other contributors from other companies by grabbing on about Automattic. That's the only thing that
not
but
dismissing
I
it,
like I like your passion for WordPress and how anybody spends their time and money. I think that's kind of. I like your opinions.
I speak to somebody who has had a reason to build things in WordPress, whether services or plugins and so forth. And as a person has development skills, I understand the complexities. There is no complexity problem here. This is just let's make a vote and come up with one interface that doesn't do things that it's not supposed to. I'm not talking about features. I'm talking about just the grab handles, acting like grab handles, stuff like that.
In the Houses of Parliament,
they're all bugs in software.
In the Houses of Parliament, the chap or lady, I shouldn't be quite so dismissive. The person who has the control has a gavel, and they get to bash it on the table and say, time's up. But they also have a sort of grey wig that they have to wear. So I feel that 50% of this requirement I have fulfilled. But I'm going to bang the table. There we go. I'm banging the table and say, thank you very much. That was a lovely conversation. Really nice, interesting, backwards and forwards type debate. Birgit, I'd love to have you back on. Spencer, it would be very nice to have you back on. But for now, we're going to say goodbye.
Maybe not together.
I think it makes better listening. Honestly.
Absolutely.
That will be the name of this.
Totally
this show.
Joking. Totally joking.
No, I know. All right,
I'll be your biggest promoter, Birgit. By the way, I'm into it.
I'm going to wave.
I know he has to wrap it up. Bye, guys. It was great to see you.
Bye. Thank you all.